in high school, and it took me looking back to realize that. I love sports. I loved both playing in them, watching them. As Sandy mentioned, that CIF banner, it's one of ours. And I also was the dork that won most school spirit. I loved debating with my teachers, pushing buttons. I loved learning about religion. I wasn't raised religious, so I didn't know much. And taking those classes helped me learn so much about the world, the people in it, and how they relate to one another. High school is here. It's right now for all of you. I know college and career is right around the corner, but be young, be free, be without responsibilities, and just enjoy it. Use this time to spend with your family and your friends, to enjoy this beautiful campus, this beautiful town. Put down your phones, put down your screens, and talk with classmates you've never had before, or try a sport or a game you never tried. Because when you're my old age of 33, you will miss it. I promise you that. Okay, so now on to college. Many of you know where you want to go, what you want to study, and there's plenty of you that haven't thought about it once. When I was your age, I felt that same pressure to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, with the false understanding that the college I chose and the major I decided to declare would dictate the rest of my life and my career path. Well, I will tell you from my perspective that that is false. Well, it's mostly false, right? So if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist or a therapist, sure, the major you choose and often the college you go to, it can be important to lead you down that path. But at your age and your shoes, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And many of my classmates who thought they did learned they were getting a little ahead of themselves. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do when I entered college. And I remember telling someone that, and they said, "Wow, you have no career goals? How embarrassing." And I wasn't embarrassed. I honestly can't tell you why, but I had this feeling that it would work out. I'm smart, I'm a hard worker, I'm open-minded, I'm creative. I knew I would figure it out. I went to the University of San Francisco, and I absolutely loved it, if any of you are looking at that school. The school was great, of course, but mostly I loved being in the city. I grew up in Ojai, so being in San Francisco was a magical place to me. The city taught me more than college ever did. It taught me to be independent, self-sufficient. I would travel by bus to get my groceries. I was doing things that I'd never done growing up in Ojai. I met people from all over the country, all over the world. And in school, I studied things I never thought I would be interested in. My favorite class was a very small and very tough nine-person lecture class on Renaissance art. And I fell in love with art history, which was, for most students, a topic, especially in college, that you're forced to take, and it's mostly just memorization and then regurgitating out onto the paper. But to me, it was a way for me to enjoy history altogether. So I'm no history buff, and I've honestly thought every history class I've ever taken was boring. But I found that through art, I could learn the history of a people, a culture, a war, a time period, and it ignited my interest in a way that I didn't know was possible. Once my dad told me, and I think it was when I was studying for a biology test, which I don't know if it's still this tough, but that was the hardest class here. Then he told me that it takes a different lens or a perspective on something to make it easier and therefore more fun. So this concept taught me that learning, no matter how you do it, is fun. It's a way to grow, to broaden your mind and your view on the world. And it's also something that not everyone knows how to do. So in today's world, we are constantly being bombarded with information, and a lot of it. It's often skewed, influenced, filtered, or just flat out false. Learning how to learn is something I learned at Villanova, and I learned even further at college. I learned how to seek out information from many sources, to sift through the opinions versus the facts, and educate myself on whatever topic was necessary for me to know. World events, current events, diseases, weather patterns, politics, climate change, whatever it may be. Keep your ears and your eyes open, keep yourself educated, and use your skills learned here to find those cited sources. Practice critical thinking every day, and never give yourself the misbelief that you know everything about anything. Humility, thoughtfulness, and the willing to learn will bring you wonderful opportunities in life. So on to my career. I have owned the Deer Lodge for 7 years. I was 26 when I became the owner, which is wild. And I just opened a new restaurant downtown called Hermanas. We're doing Mexican-inspired food. And saying those words surprised me every day. I never took a business class in my life. I learned along the way by asking the right questions from the right people. I worked hard. I enjoyed the work I was doing, and I never took myself too seriously. I sought out advice when I was lost, and I tried to remind myself that I wasn't reinventing the wheel, and nor was anyone dying on the operating table, figuratively speaking. I dedicated myself to treating my coworkers, my employees, the way that I wanted to be treated by my previous employers. I stay humble. There's no toilet I won't clean, there's no table I won't fuss, because that's where I started. My first job was at Camp Hermanas up on Fairview, and I was working in the kitchen in the dining room, serving hundreds of campers for lunch and dinner. My next job was at the Ojai coffee roasting company, where I learned to be a barista. Then I worked in another restaurant, and then at the Ojai. And in San Francisco, my sophomore year of college, I started working at a famous restaurant called the Cliff House, which maybe you've been to when you were a kid. It no longer exists, did not survive the pandemic. But there I worked there for 6 years. I was a host, a food runner. I interned in the marketing department, and before becoming a server, and then soon after a bartender. And at this point, I knew that that was what I wanted to do. I loved this industry. I wanted to grow, and I wanted to learn how to manage and to run a restaurant. That was hard for me to do in San Francisco. I was a little fish in a big sea, so I decided to move home, hit the reset button, and see what happened. Soon I started working at the Ojai again. 8 months later at the Deer Lodge as the manager, and 1 year later in a whirlwind of events, I became the owner, and 7 years later opened my own brainchild. I love hospitality for many reasons, but the main reason is how food brings people together. We are all different, with different views, opinions, upbringings, and beliefs, but we all need to eat, and we feel a whole lot better when the food that we eat is delicious. To me, the most growth happens at the dinner table. Whether it's with your family on a weeknight, or your friends on the weekends, or strangers at an event, true connection happens over a meal. So when it comes to your career path, or your journey to find it, my biggest advice would be just say yes. To be willing to take risks, to make mistakes, and to not regret those mistakes. To surround yourself with people who are honest with you, and to accept their honesty with an open mind and heart. There will be a time when the risks are too risky, and when the consequences of failure are too heavy. When you're young, you're resilient. Your abilities to adjust, to adapt, to pivot, and recover are so much greater. So take those risks. Explore topics and ideas and interests that you might have been told are silly or not going to get you anywhere. So I joke all the time with my friends, especially my friends that are the doctors and the lawyers and the accountants, and they're like, oh, you're so, look at you running businesses. And I'm like, I get people drunk for a living, okay? And yeah, that's partially true. I do. But when I'm kind to myself and I remember, that's not even close to the truth. I do my best to provide safe, healthy, and successful work environments for my staff. I do my best to create community space, to raise funds and awareness for good and decent causes. And I provide that table where the greatest growth and change takes place, where we come together to connect. And I'm proud that the risks I took and the faith I kept and the amount of times I said yes brought me to this podium today. And I'm very humbled to be asked to speak to you all today. And it's been very nerve-wracking. My heart rate's down a little bit, but it's still up there. And I hope that somewhere in my rambling I shared something helpful. And I'm told this is the time where you will ask me questions. So fire away, any topics open.
Thank you, Sophia.
Much here about myself, and I look back so fondly. So I feel like your brain kind of does that thing where it like blocks out the bad stuff, I think it was academically was the hardest part, but I think it was trying to figure out balance, and I think that did teach me how to do that as an adult. So it was hard to figure out how to, be the best athlete I could, be the best student I could, get into the schools, get all that, but it was also figuring out who you are, and I don't care who you are, everybody gets teased or made fun of or, makes that silly mistake in front of the whole school or the whole class that nobody will ever forget. And, I think all of that combined, I think that's just kind of the high school experience, and I think it's important. But the hardest thing for me, I would say, about Villanova was just figuring out balance. Going to school all day long, right? You get home at 3 o'clock, you go to your tennis or soccer practice or whatever you do, and you don't get home till 6. Then you eat dinner, and then you have 3 hours of homework. And you're like, where was my, time? And I think it might be different for kids these days, I hope so. But no? Okay, cool. We're in it together. And that was hard, you know, it was exhausting. But it's not that far off from the real world, and it also, again, it makes you feel, you know, nice and liberated when you are an adult and you have your own choice in how to balance your life. But it does teach you how to be like, okay, so what is the most important thing for me to be stable and successful and happy? More money. Okay, so it's kind of like a what don't forget to bring to college and don't forget to have. Well, dorm rooms, I would say. Some sort of way to drown out sound. You know, earplugs or whatever. But in college in general, what did I wish I had? I was actually really fortunate. My mom made me this, and you can ask your moms for it. She made me a book of all of my favorite recipes that she would make. And I still to this day call them mom dinners because they're like delicious and healthy but really easy. So I learned how to cook a lot on my own. You have to do that when you're living on a budget. I'm gonna think about that one. But I guess I would say skills. Cooking skills are great, you know. Like I said, I mentioned like I had to take the bus to go get my groceries. Like learning how, I mean, it depends on where you end up going to school, but learning how to, you know, take care of yourself. Doing laundry, really important. Because if you don't already do your laundry and you mix things or you overwash things, it's just, yeah, laundry and cooking. Best way to take care of yourself.
Any